So begins the draft physics broadcast day and such. So I did get a comment that says, Ken took out another video, this time with drawing. Can you comment, please? It's not an excuse. I probably would have done the video anyway, but it's just so stupid. But yes, let's just say this might be the last one, just because it's all so redundant and the jargon is just jargon. He never says anything, and his viewers don't respond with anything rational. The whole thing is just such a waste of time. But it's got to mean something in terms of, you see these just horrible videos, 6,000 views. We'll look at the ratings. Just garbage, junk, pseudo-science just at its worst. And, you got this 504 to 35. I mean, it's, a horrible ratio of more than 9 out of 10 people kind of thing. And you're just saying 9 out of 10 people are this frickin' stupid. But the context is that most people didn't understand anything about what Einstein was saying. And they bought it because other people said somehow it means something to take a three-dimensional universe and try to two-dimensionalize it, bend it. And then when they teach it more honestly, which is they teach it as kind of mock gravity, essentially, without the energy source. They just pretend you can imagine the drain draining, or you can imagine the water pushing. It doesn't really matter. They just wanted you to see the fact that it is a convergence, and they don't want to say convergence, so they say an anti-divergence. So they're just as full of the same jargon, right? They're using these bizarre words like, I guess the concept for Ken Wheeler, okay, so just withdraw a little bit as some kind of to get it kind of thing. Ken Wheeler thinks that okay, so this is let's just say I have a little cube in space, all right, something. He thinks that's space. So inside of here is space, okay, and this out here is counter space. So there's matter, and then there's counter space, right, where everybody, I think, on Earth is sort of gets the idea that when they're instructed in the how to use vocabulary, the idea is there's this atom, and the atom, okay, yes, it's made out of little stuff, but that's matter, okay, there's matter. So the matter is what this is called, and this is space, nothing. Now, Einstein obviously turned this into some two-dimensional thing. So instead of making space three-dimensional, he just pretended, let's just think about it as two-dimension, as one plane. And we'll just think about the plane you're on, and then we'll just make dimples in space and say you follow that trail. Now, that doesn't work in 3 dimensions at all. You can't bend anything in 3 dimensions. So it's useless. And again, when they teach it, what do they teach? They teach exactly what I'm saying. They teach this, okay? They teach that the force is as if, just as Bill Gates even says, as if there's a straight line, a string, a rope, connecting things in a straight line, and they move, okay? And again, the simple argument is this is mock gravity. This is saying it's exactly the same thing as saying there's pressure from the outside, and it pushes things based on how heavy they are, based on how much mass they have. They apply more force if you have more bits. So if you're made of more things, okay, then more stuff will hit the more things, and it'll always be in equal proportion. It hits the one atom just as much as 3 atoms. So 3 atoms get hit by 3 little bits of force, and 1 atom gets hit by 1. So it doesn't matter how you configure it. It's always going to hit your mass with exactly the same amount of force as it needs to push it. And so that's why everything falls at the same rate in gravity. I mean, alright, so that's a little bit, you have to think a little, you have to have somebody maybe help you to think straight, I mean, none of my teachers ever said anything like, the small universe is the universe. That's the real universe. That's where everything has to happen first. The atoms have to move. That means the little bits inside the atoms have to move. You know, you can't put the rider before the bicycle kind of thing. The bicycle's down there. Okay, the wheels are down there. The road is down there. All the stuff that's important is down there. And you know, the rider is just sitting on top of the rider. Our perception, the big universe, is all happening because the little universe is doing the work. The little atoms and the little bits inside the atom, they move. And they move for a reason. They don't just move because some dopey space is bent or some bullshit. They move because some kind of force has to affect them, has to act on them, as Newton stated, kind of obviously. Things are forced to do what they do. They're not sitting there saying, I'm going to go there because I feel I should. None of this feeling crap is happening. None of this, I just have an impulse from nowhere and I decide I have to go this way. None of that's happening. There's real interactions, and you just follow the interactions and you can follow what's happening. You follow the energy. Ken Wheeler has no source of energy. He has things swirling all over the fucking place for no reason whatsoever. Just crap. Nonsense. Bullshit.
Super soft with Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed. You can with your Sleep Number setting.
So he forces you to watch a 15-second commercial. Yeah. Asshole. I'm not getting anything for this. No, you're taking something for it, aren't you? Yes, that's right. Alright, let's apply platonic. So whatever this means again. Let's go back 2,000 years and talk about hygiene, you know, in that context. So do you want to live that way? Do you want to live by the hygiene standards of 2,000 years ago? You wanted them to fix your car? You know, guys from 2,000 years ago, you know, have them work on your car, put a roof on your house, do anything just about? Yeah, forget it. No. You wouldn't hire them. So why this 504 thumbs up for 2,000-year-old dumbass ideas that just, you know, they were trying. They didn't have any information, so they had to, you know, they did pretty well considering how little they knew. But let's get serious. They had no understanding of any great secrets. They had a vast lack of knowledge of the great secrets, like what a microbe was. I'm just stunned. I'm stunned people are this fucking stupid.
Reductive logic to the understanding of the distinction and
reductive logic. Yeah, well, that's all we have is logic. So, and what is logic made out of? It's a collection of facts. You put a collection of facts together, like, oh, the tortoises on this end of the island have one kind of shell, and the tortoises over there on the other side of the mountains don't have a different kind. The ones on that island are different from this island, and you put some facts together, and you say, gee, they must be, you know, selectively breeding, essentially, huh? I wonder who's doing the selecting. Could it be something like trial and error? Yeah. Different environments suit different purposes. Could it be that there's more trees on one of the islands because it's older, and therefore the turtles have a shell so they can climb the tree a little bit, you know, lean up against the tree and reach fruit? Could it be that caused them to evolve differently? Wow. Yeah, you put some fucking facts together and you come up with a rational conclusion. You don't sit there and say, oh, the shell's different because the space is bent. Oh, the shell's different because there's hyperborealoids over there, and that's counter island. You know, the counter island is different than the island, and a counter island, and the shell has room for his neck to move more because he needs to move his neck more. And the other island has turtle-eating lizards on it, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's just, no, you don't do this shit. You don't call it logic. Oh, this video will take forever. I better speed it up a little bit. Yes, better speed it up a little bit. I'm just saying, I mean, you really can't have any kind of complex. That's not even complex. Again, 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics. But people can't see, even if they agree with me, it doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, people are agreeing with Ken Wheeler in preposterously positive numbers. He's completely fucking wrong. So no matter where those people go, I mean, if they show up on my website and go, I agree with you, what does that mean? You're imbeciles. What the fuck good is the agreement? It doesn't mean anything, but you really don't understand anything. I mean, you can't understand anything about fact collection and rational conversation even if you're going to give credit to this gobbledygook. If this persuades you, you're just too fucking stupid.
Differentiation between center of mass and that of center of gravity. Here we actually have mass 1. Of course, this would be...
These are both arbitrary concepts, or erroneous in the sense that they don't really, there is no real thing. Okay, this is very conceptual. Yes, you can always find the halfway point in any straight line and say there's the halfway point. So to walk home I have to pass the drugstore. Does that mean when I'm walking home I'm going to the drugstore? Well, I'm going to go past the drugstore, yes, but that's not what's compelling me to move. I mean, this kind of stuff is just nonsense. Now, this is sort of interesting as a gravitational argument, okay? Just the sense that there's two concepts here. Now, you know, if you care about the truth, all right, then you should understand the two different concepts. And it's not that challenging, right? The two concepts aren't that challenging. So if you have two objects in space, there's two phenomena that happen between the two objects. I mean, there's the obvious difference in their sizes, you could say. There's two objects, they have a different mass, or volume, density, however you want to look at it. There's something different about them. It doesn't matter if I use two of the same, but I'm just saying I'm using two different ones just to point out the distinction. Now, if they were charges, okay, that is, if they were positive and negative charges, or they were two electrons, let's say, or if they were like the Earth and the Moon, you can understand that between the two, there's a point where the gravitational pull towards the Moon, okay, because you're close to it, is equal to the gravitational pull of the Earth because now you're far away from it. And there's this point in space, okay, where the two forces are now equal. And that's all they are. They're equal. It's not that the forces don't exist. It's not that the Moon stopped having a mass and the Earth stopped having a mass. They're still producing the same, I would argue, reflection of the universe. They're still admitting everything is still the same for them, okay? For somebody on the Moon, it's the same, nothing has changed. Somebody on the Earth, nothing changes because there's a spot here where the force is equal. So it's unequal here, you know, little arrow pushing up, big arrow pushing down kind of thing. There's an imbalance. You can't go into the Earth because it's full of mass and you create pressure that goes in, so that's the equalizing part. This little arrow plus this big arrow, you know, equals this arrow. But I'm just saying that this mechanics isn't that complicated. Okay, so there's a spot here. It's not halfway, it's not any of those kind of ways between the two locations where there's a balance in the force. So we say that's anti-gravity or ungravity or free fall, or we use lots of rhetoric, but actually it means there's still the same amount of force that was on you when you were here, or when you were here, or when you were here. It doesn't change the amount of force, it just changes in what direction. There's an imbalance. So in one place you have strong force this way and weak force that way, and that's all it means. It doesn't mean there's no gravity. It means that the two gravities are balanced. The two forces are balanced. Okay, now the other concept is if I'm looking at two objects, right, I got my eye here, right, and I'm looking, I guess the pupil should be in here somewhere, and I'm looking at this object. Well, the further away I go, you can sort of understand that if these two objects were, you know, producing some sort of difference, right, this one's producing hard lines and this one's producing dotted lines, you can understand that the further away I go, the more this stuff is going to intersect as it gets to me, okay? And I'm going to see these objects as almost one object. And you could argue that if I was to make them one object, there would be a place, okay, that would be the center of the mass, and so to speak, in the sense that these two arcs would be like this, you could say, and there would be a place where I would see the center of mass, and that those 2 points don't necessarily have to be the same point. In this case, I think they'd be the opposite. So the center of mass would be here. So it would be exactly the opposite position to where there's this null point, where their gravity is balanced. It wouldn't be the same as where the center of mass would be in terms of what how the radiation would appear from a distant point. So I'm just saying these two objects do create one object, in the sense that I'll probably do this way too far over there, but it creates a one object that has a new center of gravity that's a little bit off from the original center of gravity, because there's mass over here, and you have to calculate it as one object from a distance. So anyway, those are the two concepts, and they don't mean anything really. They don't they're not stunningly important to describing what gravity is. So he says this is the secret of gravity in counter space, and yet can't possibly have any relevance or meaning in terms of being significant in some way. The fact that the drugstore is halfway between your house and the place you work doesn't mean anything.
The epicenter right here. Now that's the center of mass, but what about the center of gravity? People are often confusing the center of gravity with the center of mass. Now, in the case of a single body, the center of mass is not changing, but the center of gravity...
Yeah, so in the case of a single object, that's right, the center of mass and the center of gravity are the same thing. And it's only if you're saying from a distance, again from close up, where this place would be is completely dependent on your perspective. So the further away you go, that spot changes.
They can change instantly.
So again, he aggressively argues for this instant change. Well, yeah, as things move, where their force is going changes, but the force moves at the speed of light. So he doesn't have any evidence that any force moves faster than the speed of light. Obviously, we'd be capitalizing on it, right? You can understand that if we had a magnetism effect that we could make move faster than light, that would be using it. If we had some sort of special electricity move faster than light, we'd be using it. So if there was anything that happened instantaneously, we would be taking advantage of it. This is just baby talk. He has absolutely not a shred of evidence to defend anything moving faster than the speed of light.
So take a quick look at barycenter, and this is a term that you can look up. It's B-A-R-Y-C-E-N-T-E-R, and this is the case.
So why don't you look it up for us? What's the big deal, right? You could look it up for us and point out how it's relevant to anything important.
So the center of mass of...
He's probably reading from the wiki page right now.
Two or more bodies. Okay, let's eliminate out this. Let's actually draw the mass 1 and mass 2 of two bodies in elliptical motion.
So again, he doesn't even do this right. I mean, it's something as simple as two objects orbiting around each other. Okay, they don't do what he describes at all. Well, I'll show. I mean, it doesn't happen that way in space.
Let's draw the ellipses of two masses here. They don't have to have identical ellipses. Let's say one can have a different ellipse than another.
This would be true if you put a planet here or some kind of object here. Then it is possible for two objects to orbit in these ellipses. But the ellipses are never this dramatic, frankly. In most things observed, solar systems, for example, things have elliptical orbits, but they don't look very elliptical. I mean, the Earth's percentage of out of perfect round is not huge. It's 0.3% or something. It's not much of an ellipse. Well, not 3%, it's more than that. It's always exaggerated.
Here we actually have mass 1, and over here we can actually have mass 2. Now, where is the center?
So two masses do not orbit each other this way ever, 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 ever. I mean, you can understand quite obviously there's no reason for this object to bend in here, and there's no reason for this object to bend in here. There has to be something in here for them both to be orbiting. So this never happens. Two objects never orbit this way. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. You have to bend these lines. See, he doesn't understand. Things can't just turn for no reason. They have to turn because a force has to act on them. Obviously, if this is over here, there's not going to be any reason for this line to bend. This thing's going to go straight this way. This one's going the wrong way. They're going to miss each other. There's going to be no force to pull them back. None.
Of mass using the equation for barycenter of two-body problem. The center of mass is, I mean, this in this case we can actually refer.
So the center of mass here would be constantly changing based on where the position of the two objects are. So if they were both here at the same time, let's just say this is theoretically possible, which it's not. If they were both here and here, then the center of mass would be here. If they were both out here and out here, then the center of mass would be here. I mean, it's just going to be some point between the two masses. Now, if they're exactly the same mass, it makes it really easy because it's just the midway point between the two objects.
For the center of gravity also, but where's the center of mass between mass 1 and mass 2? Well, it's located right here. It has no place. This is the center of mass right here between these two bodies, where we have R1.
Again, it's not a center of mass. It's just ends up being the point. Like I said, if I'm close, I'm going to be able to, from any close position, you can sort of see in this diagram that you'll end up closer to one object than you will the other. So let's just say where he wrote this little whatever it is, that's where you are. Well, if you're close, this one's going to be a lot stronger than this one because it's a lot further away. So the center is going to be bent in the sense of you know, your line of how you're going to be pulled, and you're going to be pulled to the center of mass essentially of the two competing forces, where the balance point between them is where you're going to be essentially you're going to line up with in terms of being pulled, you know, pushed, but whatever. But the further away you go, that point changes because your angles change. And the amount of difference it makes between these two objects pull on you diminishes with distance.
Equals A, M2 over M1 plus M2. This isn't all that incredibly important, but math isn't important. It's actually understanding the concept. So the center of mass is right here. We actually have the elliptical orbits. This is actually observed many countless thousands of times in astronomy.
So this isn't observed ever in astronomy. So again, this is just nonsense. When two objects rotate around each other, they rotate around each other. That is, they're being constantly, they're constantly in proportional alignment, and they just end up rotating around each other. But their orbits are the same, not different. They're just in a different position.
Two binary stars orbiting each other, but they're not orbiting each other. This is the actual same correct observation and correct description, but incorrect explanation. That's the nature.
So again, they're not orbiting each other. They're orbiting some point in space. Well, it's just not true. So frankly, it's all orbiting the other thing. If the other thing doesn't produce the force, it doesn't produce the force in return. There's no connection between them then, so they're clearly, all of the reason to move is in the direction of the object they're connected to, and that's it. What it radiates. But again, nothing does this. This is just nonsense.
They're magnets. For many thousands of years, human beings have witnessed magnets accelerating towards one another, but they're actually not accelerating towards one another. They're actually...
So anybody could say this, right? Anybody could say, you're not walking home, you're walking to the drugstore because the drugstore's on your way home. I could say it, but you know you're walking home. You know you're not walking to the drugstore. The motivation is not the drugstore. This middle point is not where things are moving towards. It's not where the force is affecting them. The thing that has the force change, that made the change in your environment, the thing that's reflecting a different look. It's like when you see reflected light off of a surface, you're not seeing the light from the midway point. You know the light didn't come from there. It came from the surface it's reflecting off of. There's no confusion. I mean, I could make some assertion. Well, no, the photons are really coming from the halfway point between you and the object. Well, I could assert it, but I have no evidence that that happens. And I have no logic that makes that happen. So there's nothing logical that says that makes sense. I could make it up, and it could be completely you can't prove it. You can't prove it's not coming from the midway point between. You know, the light doesn't come from the light bulb. It comes from the point halfway between me and the light bulb. Well, how do I prove otherwise? It's not possible to prove otherwise without interfering. So how do I prove you're full of shit? You just made that up. You just made that up. It's crap. There's no evidence supporting it. It's just that you can't compile any evidence rejecting it because there's no way to do the experiment, because there's no way to test 2 points at the same time.
Accelerating towards a null point in counter space. And this, of course, is in its most simplex explanation, because simplicity is a divinity. If you can't...
Yeah, so simplicity is divinity. Well, whatever divinity is, why should that impress me anyway? Why should science be wrapped up in something called divinity? So right there, that jargon should be a little bit obnoxious to a scientist or anybody who cares about the truth. Should we talk about evolution as the divine evolution? So right there, you know you're in trouble. This is a religious kook. They're all eating it up. They're all science deniers.
And actually make things simple an explanation, then you don't really understand it. What we're actually talking about is ether torsion. Yes, ether torsion.
Right. And there's no evidence of this ether torsion in the sense that you know, I can throw the wrench in space and the torsion doesn't stop the wrench. Let's see what else. It does stop electrons and protons, but it doesn't create any effects. I mean, I can't measure any vibrations coming off of a photon, you know, sideways. I can only collect the photon with an electron. Is there any other way I can collect a photon except by having it hit an electron? Is there any other way to feel its existence, its torsion? No. Sounds like a pile of made-up crap.
That's absolutely correct. Now let's erase all this stuff here and use the simplex retroductive logical analysis.
Okay, so again, there's something simplex about drawing orbits that can't possibly exist. Okay, and to talk about some silly notion that when I'm walking home from work, I'm really going to the drugstore instead of home.
Analysis that, say, a pupil of Plato at the age of 14 would use.
So again, he knows what happened to people 2,000 years ago. He has the real story, you know, because he has a videotape or something. They can't even tell the truth about people who lived just mere decades ago. I mean, again, I just saw an Einstein documentary that was a complete pile of fabricated crap. I mean, there wasn't anything true in it except the name of some of the people. But everything that happened was bullshit. Just complete bullshit. And that was only a few decades ago. When we have absolute records, I mean, divorce papers, we have all kinds of records, handwritten notes. We have all kinds of records indicating real opinions and attitudes, and they still can't write the story honestly. And he's going to tell me about Plato and some 14-year-old boy. Yeah, sure.
And speaking about or making reference to ether torsion. Ether torsion. My handwriting sucks, especially on a tablet, right? Now, center of gravity changes instantly.
So again, it's more, no, things move non-instantly. And when they move, they take their light bulb with them. Okay, if I move a light bulb, okay, what do you think? You think the photons change position instantly? You know, like, what does that even mean? The light bulbs moves slowly. I can only move the light bulb slowly. I can't move the light bulb instantly to some new place. But do you think if I moved it instantly to some new place that it would create all the rays that were on their way, all the photons that were already on their way would somehow be pushed ahead automatically. They wouldn't have to actually travel from the new position to the, to wherever they're going. They wouldn't still be moving the speed of light. I can somehow create some kind of instant event. There's no instant events. This is just it's just absolute nonsense, just eaten up by a bunch of idiots. What else can you say? What as a scientific principle, the word instant is so fucking useless. What person who knows anything about anything, tortoise shells, whatever, who the fuck would use the word instant? It's a nonsense word. It has no place because there's just absolutely no evidence that anything happens instantly.
Let's just take a couple models here, and then we'll take a look at magnetism and so-called magnetic attraction here.
The so-called movement of objects towards each other. Whether it's attraction or being pushed from the outside, who cares, right? That's not terribly important. The fact is, two objects move towards each other. That's the significant thing. Somehow they're motivated. What motivates them? What compels them? What is the mechanism that compels them? This idiot's basically saying they instantly know I have to go. Like they have to go to the bathroom or something.
Very shortly, this would be the center of gravity, also to the center of mass of a single body, mass 1. Now, if you introduce a secondary body, or mass 2, here, with its own center of mass here, it instantly changes.
There's no instant arrival. There's no instant change. The light bulb has to be moved from one place to another. So the two light bulbs, you have a blue light bulb and you have a red light bulb. And you can understand that if I move the two light bulbs together, the amount of light that will look like purple, right, blue and red, will change as they get closer and closer together. I'm going to see more and more purple. Wow. But nothing will happen instantly.
Between both of these. And here we actually have now where the center of gravity shifts to, depending on the size of mass 1 and mass 2, I'm going to make it super exact, but right here.
So, again, he got it wrong, right? Wrong answer, Ken. That's only from somebody's perception. Would it be here? Okay, where the force is going to be null, where it's going to be balanced, is going to be way over here next to the little mass, not the big mass. I mean, unless this diagram was of, well, this is a balloon and this is a lead ball. Nah, he didn't say that. He didn't say, he's implying that M2 is a smaller mass, correct? He's not implying that this is a piece of lead and this is a balloon full of air.
This now becomes the center of gravity, or we call it the very center. It's instantly changed from this location, instantly shift from this location to the...
So again, the two objects can't instantly arrive where they are, and the light coming off of them, the force, can't instantly arrive anywhere. So none of that can happen instantly. I mean, you can understand, as I move the light bulb, the light still has to travel from the new location to the other location. It has a distance it has to travel from the point it's emitted. So if the M2 is over here, the distance the light has to travel is that distance. When it's up here, it's a closer distance. No doubt about that. But the truth is the old light from here is going to arrive sooner than this light because you can't move the speed of light. So you can't keep it consistent with the radiation produced when the object was here. That radiation is still going to beat this radiation to the target because this one moved so much slower than the speed of light. I mean, this is turtle rabbit kind of stuff. I mean, people really shouldn't get it wrong. Rabbits are the fast thing, turtles slow thing.
This location. And if we're actually able to introduce mass 2 instantly, it would change also instantly and instantaneously.
So nothing would change instantly. So even if I can move its position instantly, the light would still take time, and the force of gravity is the same as light. It's moving at the constant speed, and it's not instantaneous. Just stupid.
Its action at a distance is not joined either by relativity or by quantum, because nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, but it does.
So he says, with zero evidence. So he has absolutely zero evidence of anything traveling faster than the speed of light, any kind of communication at all between two objects, including gravity. There's just no evidence, and there's every bit of evidence that if you give gravity the speed of light, you can better calculate where things should be. It makes better predictions. The math works better if gravity moves the speed of light. Right there is enough of an indication that that's probably the right answer then.
So-called center of gravity is only meant the lowest pressure mediation relative to counter space, i.e. the...
So again, i.e. the ether, the this, the that. So counter space is space. Space is mass, matter. Matter is space, right? So this is how backward this crap is. And people are eating this crap up. So you've converted very useful words into useless words by basically calling the thing that was nothing something, right? And the stuff that was nothing is now counter nothing or something like that. I don't even know what to, counter nothing. Does that make any sense? No, because then that sounds like space. So it doesn't even make any sense. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Counter space is what he's calling, is what we call space. Nothing.
Lowest pressure, or against ether torsion. Now, actually,
lowest pressure or against ether torsion. Now, how do I put those concepts together? So the universe is low pressure. It starts off with a lack of pressure. Well, how would a lack of pressure push things together? That can't possibly work. So what does that mean? And then ether torsion. What are you talking about? Ether torsion. Torsion what? Torsion to expand everything? A lack of pressure? Wouldn't that be a lack of torsion? Doesn't even make sense. Just gibberish.
Let's erase all this and show you something else. You can also see this underneath. You can even use magnetic viewing.
I mean, this just demonstrates, like I said, that I'm hugely successful, because if this is going to get rewarded, if 504 people are going to hit a thumbs up button on purpose to say this makes sense, I obviously don't want that to happen. I mean, I don't want those people to go to my videos and say this makes sense, right? I mean, that would be the worst thing that could happen, is that somebody who thinks this makes sense would think I'm making sense. That would be the difference between Darwin and the religious guy, right? I mean, you don't want a bunch of the church people to all of a sudden run to your science room and start praising God and, oh, I'll pray to the evolution. And doing all that kind of crap. That would be like, oh, I must be telling the story wrong. They're not getting it. I'm not saying that shit. That shit's nonsense. I'm not telling you a God story. So clearly they want a bullshit story of gibberish. So I'm succeeding, because obviously if I was getting these kind of numbers, it would all be dupes and idiots.
Film to observe this. You can look at it underneath the supercell, but you can see it instantly also too. There we got a Bohr magnet. They could be spherical magnets, they could be cylindrical magnets. Here we actually have another one, right? Another Bohr magnet or cylinder magnet. It makes no difference. Now, as I've said before,
well, of course it does make a difference, frankly. It's how they're magnetized does sort of make a difference, but whatever. I mean, cylindrical magnets are not necessarily as well aligned. Okay, they have their north and south poles are pointing in more than one direction. They have polarity in more than one direction.
Many countless times, you're not accelerating towards one another, and you can see this underneath the supercell, and also too underneath magnetic viewing film. Actually,
okay, now if you looked under a microscope, you could see it. Okay, in the supercell, and you'd see exactly what you see with iron filings. You'd see these all line up, little straight lines coming out of this end and little straight lines coming out of this end, and you'd see some of the magnets line up this way, and they're lining up south north, not north south. They're lining up in the opposite magnetic polarity, and That's why they're repelling each other. Each little line repels each other because they're all the same magnets and they're all opposite the main magnet that created them. And that's what you'll see. You'll see exactly what the science says exists. Exactly. Not any of this Ken Wheeler crap.
Accelerating towards a null point, lowest pressure mediation between these two in counter space. But what you will also see...
So you won't see anything called a counter space. You'll just see a place where there's a lot of ferrofluid. Okay, that means lots of little bits lining up, as you do with magnets, right? If I put iron filings around this magnet without a piece of paper, the iron filings will stick more at this end and more at this end than they'll stick here in the middle. That's what will happen. The two ends will get real fuzzy and the middle will be less fuzzy. And that's exactly what will happen. There's no counter space. There's just a place where, yeah, it either is going to flip this way or it's going to flip that way. The north end is going to go flying to the south end stronger than the other way around. So the magnets will be, you know, you could randomly drop magnets and you'll see that they'll turn this way or they'll turn this way predominantly. Very few of them will take this straight path because very few of them will be dropped in the right alignment to take a straight path.
As these get closer, they will eventually form. Once the two have come as close as possible together, there will be, of course, two magnets there, but there will only be a...
Well, technically there won't be two magnets. So technically what they're going to be is exactly what I've described as two charged monopoles. It will be close together, but it won't be technically an atom. Okay, so you can line up atoms like this with their north and south ends, you know, in the sense that there's more electrons on one side than there is the other, or the electrons are closer to the proton or further from the proton. And so there's a bias from perspectives in terms of a polarity. But they aren't technically atoms. So they're not doing exactly what the real magnets are doing. So when you break them apart, you won't break the atoms in half. You'll break them on the atoms. And obviously the atoms, like say, if I pile another magnet on top of this one, it's going to line up south, north, and staggered. And when I break it apart, it's going to stay staggered. Okay, it's going to stagger. And that means all the north ends will be facing one way and all the south ends will be facing the other way. So there's no grand mystery to the fact that you break a magnet in half and you get two new magnets. You get two new magnets, but you're not breaking the atoms in half. You're not breaking the things that make the magnet in half.
This, of course, will be... the magnets will be separated here, but this will be the plane of inertia. We should have the plane of inertia here on this magnet. The plane of inertia.
So this magical plane of inertia, that doesn't mean a damn thing. Okay, it just basically means that you have these two... You have two charges. If I took two charges and it was possible that they wouldn't electrically discharge, all right, so I took two charged pieces of fluff, all right, positive and negative, and I smashed them together and they didn't electrically communicate, all right, that's all that is. And so of course in the middle here there can't be anything happening because there can't be any reflections, there can't be any interactions once I've smashed them together. There can't be any force between them anymore. So I've eliminated everything that can happen between them anymore. It has no exposure to the real universe anymore. You can clearly see that, right? There's no exposure to the real universe anywhere. To get to this point, you have to go through the north or you have to go through the south. No radiation can get to that point. So yes, it's inert. Yeah.
Inertia here, but as they accelerate not towards each other, which is a correct description and a correct observation, but an incorrect explanation.
Right. So, and he says so. So it's just, he says so. So he says the light doesn't come from the light bulb, it comes from halfway. The halfway point's really where the photons start. They don't really come from the light bulb. They don't start till they're at the halfway point and then they turn into photons. I can make up that crappy, stupid theory, and realistically, there's no way you can disprove it. You know, it's hard to come up with an experiment to prove it. So I could point out how when you get magnets really close together, they're going to flip, but yeah, they're going to flip through a center point between them distance-wise. So yeah, it's always going to look like they're flipping towards the center because they have to go through the center, just like you have to go past the drugstore walking home. I can't prove you're not going to the drugstore, you know.
Towards the lowest pressure point between both, just like our berry centers of mass 1 and mass 2, you can actually see, and don't take my word for it.
That's all there is your word for it. There's no evidence. There's nothing. You're just saying it. You're saying, I'm going to the drugstore. I know I'm walking fucking home, but you're just saying it. All right? And it's an accusation I can't defend myself against because it's basically you making the accusation that I, you know, when I'm asleep at night and nobody's seeing me, I turn into the Invisible Man and rob banks. You can make up any kind of fucking story. How do I defend myself? This is bullshit.
Observe it yourself. Both magnets, you will see the plane of inertia right here and right here. All right.
Yes, there's a midpoint in the magnet. It's not a surprise. That's the way magnets work. They're filters. There's a point where they're filtering almost nothing, okay? Because almost nothing hits that point and gets moved south or gets moved north. There's the least amount. The south end is pushing stuff north, and the north end is pushing stuff south. Obviously, right in the middle, it's going to be even.
Here, shift. It will actually move. You can see as closer and closer you get these magnets, it will shift. It will go like this, and then it will be right here between both magnets. It will shift.
So this is more horseshit, right? He says, do the experiment. Why don't you do it? Why don't you prove that that happens? But I mean, obviously, where magnets are going to align, if I'm testing this field with a magnet, obviously when I cram two magnets together, you know, if I have this precisely in between the two magnets, obviously I'm going to end up with a change in the balance of the force between these four charges. You got four charges essentially interacting with one charge. It's going to be very hard to tell which influence is the influence that's moving something. But clearly, if I'm right in between the two, I'm just going to get another balanced field.
The plane of inertia, because this is actually counter space. And this is counter space. But both of these are moving towards the lowest pressure medium.
So whatever that means, it's counter space. So it's not matter. It's some sort of nothing. There's nothing here. That's counter space is nothing. That's space. Right? No, there's stuff there. It's just that it's balanced. It's trapped between two equal pressures. Two opposites.
Between both, i.e. the ether torsion, and this. Located where
i.e. the ether torsion. Again, draw me a picture of ether torsion. What the fuck are you talking about? What's ether torsion? What is this gibberish? Again, how can this possibly make sense to people who have any reasoning skills at all? How does a term like ether torsion mean something to them? How do they interpret that as being meaningful words? Ether torsion. I go look it up in the dictionary. What am I going to see as a definition? What am I going to see as a drawing of an ether torsion? Fuck.
nothing is. Space has no properties, by the way, Nikola Tesla.
Space has no properties. So space is supposed to be matter, and now he's saying matter doesn't have any properties. And now he's going to say something so fucking stupid. You're just saying, why am I, what's the point of existing? Somebody's going to get rewarded for saying something as stupid as space has no properties, it just has attributes. How the fuck can you have an attribute without having a property? How is that fucking possible? What the fuck does that mean? It's a diamond, but it's not. It's square, but it's not. What does that mean?
Really his most important statement that really nobody quotes Nikola Tesla on is that space has no properties, it only has attributes.
And how does that mean anything? It has attributes. How can nothing have an attribute? How can something that doesn't have a property have an attribute? How can it... the word attribute is a synonym for the word property. Is there some other way to look at it? Can somebody give me the explicit definition that makes an attribute different than a property? That somehow you don't need a property to have an attribute, that you can cause an effect without having any kind of effect cause thing, without having a causer property? I can have no ability to shoot a gun, and yet I can shoot the gun. What sense does that make? How can it possibly make any sense to anybody? Fucking dumb fuckers. I mean, you know, we're going to make monuments to these people. Just preposterous retardation.
This is why he called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot, and he called...
Yeah, well, Einstein was fuzzy-haired, and in my opinion, Ben Space was crackpot. Time dimension was crackpot. Clocks break, that's all. Sorry, Albert. It's no more complicated than that.
Relativity, a quote-unquote mass and jumble of bad ideas. This is...
Yes, there was a bunch of bad ideas, but frickin' attributes without properties is a bad idea also. Really bad. Worse idea. It's worse.
Counter space. Before these two magnets join together, and there's no such thing as magnetic attraction. The distinction between so-called gravity and so-called magnetic attraction is merely an attribution.
Merely an attribution. It's just only fundamental. The difference between charge and gravity is fundamentally different in the sense that the charge does this repulsion thing, which gravity obviously doesn't do. So they're clearly not the same mechanism. Both of them have one thing in common. That is, matter moves. And it moves for reasons. And the reasons the matter moves are different for charge than they are for gravity, in the sense that the absorption is the same. They're both absorbing momentum, but clearly charge momentum is different in the sense that it's caused by two different forces.
Is mutual mass acceleration point non-specific, and the other one is coherent or point source mutual acceleration.
So again, it doesn't mean anything. Point non-specific. It doesn't know where it is. So he's doing this wooey space thing. Stuff doesn't have it's not where it's supposed to be. It's non-specific somehow in its location. Somehow that has something to do with something. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. What does that mean? Point source. Yes, everything radiates from a point that has properties, and that's why it's radiating something different to the universe.
This is counter space right here, and this, as the two come together, and finality translates into this.
In finality, this converts into this, and there's no thises here at all. All you're saying is that, yes, if I put two charges together, right in between the charges, not much is happening that we can see. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Here we actually have both magnets together and their lowest pressure point. And then there is no longer a south pole on this magnet. There's no longer a north pole on this. Together both. And this, of course, is the incommensurability of both.
So, again, to say that there is no is, how do you know? You didn't squoze yourself between them, and you certainly didn't measure on the surface of the atoms. The atoms are still polarized. The fact is they're just combining their effect. They're doing the same thing. Each one does the same thing. So if north energy hits the south, it gets pushed to the north. And if I put another magnet on the end, then the same thing will happen. The north will push it into the south, and the south will push it into the north.
Together. Let's take a look at something else here. Distinguish center of mass and center of gravity. Let's say center, in just the case, let me put this in black and take a look at two magnets. Yeah, once again. And two masses. This time, let's make both masses equal. They're both accelerating towards counter space. In this the case, the introduction...
So again, they're both accelerating towards space. So it has nothing to do with what they're radiating, reflecting to the world. They're not creating some sort of pressure between them. He is not explaining whether they're charges. So these are magnets somehow. So that's basically a charge phenomenon. It says polarized. It has both charges are involved. The monopoles of magnetism are charged.
Of the mass 2 here versus mass 1 here. Or in this case, we get to say magnet 1, same thing. Magnet 1 and magnet 2 here. The center of gravity switches instantaneously from here to here. And the plane of inertia...
So, again, just no evidence for any of that. No evidence that because something is along your way, there's a tree on the path you're walking, that somehow you were walking to the tree. There's just no evidence.
Between both these magnets, switches between here and here. Let me put this in red. Right now we actually have the plane of inertia on both the magnets here. We have the center of gravity on both masses here and here, but with the introduction of the second, it shifts instantly between here and here to here, instantaneously between here and here to here. There is absolutely no distinction between so-called gravitational acceleration and so-called magnetic attraction.
So there's clear distinction, so I'm just saying it's just nonsense to sit there and say they're the same thing when they're clearly not the same thing. I just switched that magnet around, the two things are flying apart from each other. Clearly, fundamentally different things. I mean, moving towards something and moving away from something are not to be confused as the same thing. They're not the same thing. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Light bulb on, light bulb off. Not the same thing.
Attraction does not exist. Magnetism, by denotation and definition, is center.
So here we go. By denotation and definition is gibberish, 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 gibberish. So no explanation for what it is, what's causing it, how it's caused. Nothing here. Nothing. Nothing. Just gibberish.
People divergence. It is literally force in motion. It is the inverse of increasing inertia.
It's force in motion, the increase of some kind of acceleration. It's obviously acceleration. It's not the opposite of acceleration.
Acceleration, magnetic attraction absolutely does not exist. Now the thing that we actually...
Again, attraction does not exist. I will gladly argue that nothing is attracted to something else in any way. It is not pulled. It is always being pushed. And there's just a lack of pushing from one side. And that's it. The Earth moves. Alright? Its movement requires that it absorb energy. The energy doesn't reach me. Okay? Clearly. And I fall. Okay? I am pushed by the force that does exist that didn't get absorbed. The non-absorbed force hits me and there's an imbalance and I move in the direction of the imbalance. That's all there is, idiots.
We call, put that down here. Brief.
Another commercial. I don't ask for anything. I don't take anything. I don't get anything. No, I'm doing it all for free. Oh, no, you're not, asshole. Forced ads.
South Pole here, South Pole here. The thing that we actually call magnetic repulsion actually is magnetism. Except
So magnetic repulsion is magnetism. Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? I would have never guessed that magnetic repulsion is magnetism. I mean, he's so lost in his gibberish, you know. Let's do that again, just for fun. Another commercial might play again.
Briefly, South Pole here, South Pole here. The thing that we actually call magnetic repulsion actually is magnetism, except it's a...
Yes, magnetic repulsion actually is magnetism. I would have never guessed. Bluebirds are birds. Actually. Did you know that?
Multiplicative thereof. You can increasing to infinity application of...
So again, just more gibberish. Increase to infinity, blah, 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 blah. There's no evidence that it increases to infinity, that there's an infinite amount of pressure that can be created, especially in regards to repulsion, because we see that. We push two magnets together. We know it's not an infinite amount of force because, frankly, we're allowed to apply the force. We can measure how much force we have to apply to push the two magnets together. So obviously not infinite. Now, it's strong, but it's obviously not infinite. So somehow the force does run out, the amount of stuff. And I would argue clearly because when you're pushing the two things together, you're actually eventually push the electrons right out of the picture. And they're the things causing the repulsion. And once you've pushed them out, you know, once you squoze the electrons out, they can't do anything inside anymore because you squoze them out, just like putting too much whatever. People must eat a lot of what, ham and eggs. So you make a big giant ham and egg sandwich, and then you smash on it, and all the stuff goos out the sides because you couldn't figure out you put too much on the bread. Something like that. Yeah, it squeezes out.
Force, and you'll have an increase of force as it is also applied, respectively. Anyway, let's get rid of this here.
Yes, and it'll be proportional to rules. And those rules have absolutely nothing to do with this gibberish.
Just as magnets get closer, you can see the plane of inertia, like I've shown you. Shift. Don't take my word for it. View it yourself.
So again, why don't you view it for us? Why don't you just film it? You're a camera nut. You got a ton of cameras. You got $5,000, $10,000 cameras. Why don't you just show it?
Shift. The same thing between two bodies, where the center of gravity instantly shifts.
And why don't you show us the instant part just with your ferrocell? Because your ferrocell certainly doesn't do anything instantly. You have to wait for the little filings to be moved. So, not even close to instantly. Oh, this is just such crap, right? So enough of this already.
Instantly, okay? It instantly shifts from here to here to here. Plane of inertia on these magnets shifts from here to here to here. And once these two magnets...
Alright, whatever all that is. Just gibberish. So let's move ahead to where he starts drawing his swirly bits. Let's see. I don't know what this is, but yeah, let's see what this stupid drawing was.
Magnets are incredibly powerful. The center of a magnet, there is no magnetic flux.
So again, he's saying there's no whatever in the center of the magnet. And that's like saying there's no gravity when you're, halfway, when you're at the no gravity point between the Earth and the Moon, a place where there's no gravity because you're equally being pushed, right? So he doesn't understand that anything that looks like energy, okay, things can be under a very high pressure and just be standing still because there's equal pressure on both sides. Doesn't mean there's no pressure. Standing still doesn't mean there's no pressure. A tug of war, the little flag, sits in one place. Does it mean because there's no tension on the rope in either direction? No. There's lots of tension. It's just the equal amount of tension. So again, he doesn't understand the basic concepts. The force isn't nothing. The force is balanced.
Obviously not. This is the plane of inertia. This is correct. The center of gravity, there is no gravity.
So the obvious point is that if you put a charge in this location and you could equalize these forces more perfectly, that is, it couldn't tell the difference where they were coming from. If they were coming from the same place, there would be just as much attractive force as there would be repulsive force. So in a way, if I can get those things close enough and I can put something far enough where it just sees the one thing, the one color, it'll look like nothing. It's like you're going to see red and you're going to be able to see blue, but if it's purple you can't see it. That's the effect, essentially. But it doesn't mean there's no purple. It doesn't mean there's no blue and red. It just means you can't see purple.
Gravity doesn't exist. We can say this is the center of gravity. For mere sake of convention, we can talk about gravity and the center of gravity, but if you go to the center of a large mass, if that were possible, there would of course be no acceleration. This, of course, is also the plane of inertia, or specifically in the case of a mass, would be counter space right here. This is also...
Whatever. This is also counter space, ether, zone, whatever their babbly words are. But they don't say anything. It's matter and then nothing. That's what the universe is made out of. Nothing, which has the force in it, actually. You could call that, you want to call that ether, it's okay with me. But it's there, and it's pressurized. It's not torsioned, it's pressurized. The bits don't like each other, either. Okay, they're not connected to each other. You move one doesn't mean you move all the others. They're not jello.
Counter space. I could say plane of inertia, or I could say counter space. Because then we actually have to understand what is polarity. A magnet actually doesn't have poles.
So again, the word poles is to describe exactly what a magnet has. So it's like saying water isn't wet. Of course it is. That's what the word was invented to describe, was the concept of wetness. It's invented for the purpose. You can't say it isn't that, because the word was invented to describe exactly the properties it has. The word poles was invented to describe exactly the phenomenon of two different, distinctly different ends to a thing. So it's just ludicrous to say it doesn't have those things when of course it has them. It has the consequence. Polarity is a consequence of property differences. There's clear property differences between the north side of the magnet and the south side of the magnet. Clear ones. This is just such gibberish.
There's another fact that you don't have to take my word on.
Yeah, you do have to, but you don't have a shred of evidence. You don't cite a single fucking experiment ever.
Magnets are usually ceramic and they break kind of like dinnerware, so you can't really slice them like a hunk of salami, but...
Yes, and that should give it away, shouldn't it? That should partially tell you something. That what's it splitting on? Well, it's splitting on domains, and it's splitting on atoms. The atoms aren't breaking in half. It's breaking around them, and it's breaking around clumps of atoms, and that's why it breaks the way it breaks. Unevenly. And if you could do it more and more precisely, you'd still be stuck with the fact that there's no scalpel in the world that can cut the magnet in half, that is, cutting through the atoms.
But if you can, and this has been done...
Liar.
And we have to talk about incommensurability, because a magnet doesn't actually have pole, south pole here, north pole here, plane of inertia right here. Take a large magnet, if you're able to slice it super, super thin, like a hunk of salami, you can take 1,000 slices, 1,000,000 slices, 1,000,000,000 slices.
So again, he doesn't understand that the magnet is made out of atoms, and it is the polarity of the atoms, all stacked on top of each other, that makes the magnet a magnet. The magnet is in fact made out of a bunch of little magnets, and they're called atoms. And the atoms are all piled on top of each other, north, south, north, south, north, south. And obviously, to stick to each other properly without being repulsive, the south end has to be here for the next magnet, so they have to stagger. He doesn't understand that. And then when you break them apart, you're breaking them on the stagger. So this will be a north over here, and this will be a north, and then there'll be a north, and then there'll be a north, and there'll be a north. So one side will go all north, and one side will go all south in the stagger.
If I took the tiniest 1/1,000,000th of a slice off the quote-unquote north pole right here, you know what I would have in that tiny little slice? I'd actually have a north pole. Actually be like this. It'd be north pole and south pole. Each little slice, no matter how thick it is.
So again, it does matter how thick it is if you understand what an atom is. So you people don't believe that there is a thing called an atom. Is that it? You don't believe in atoms. You don't believe in the periodic table. You don't believe in electrons and protons. What do you believe in then? Why don't you do that story? Why don't you explain to me what the magnet is made out of if it's not made out of polarized atoms?
Makes no difference. This is incommensurability. There is no North Pole here. There is no South Pole. Sure there is. Everybody knows that. You're looking at a bar magnet.
Yes, water is wet and there's poles on magnets. That's right. I'm damn sure. I'd bet the universe on it. You know, everything valuable I own, possess, have ever had, anything on it. It's clearly got poles. The word works. It describes what is happening. There are poles on the magnet.
You tattooed moron. Of course there is. Right there is a South Pole and right there is a North Pole. No, it's not located there.
So again, more nonsense. It's located there and it's located there. It's radiating something different here than it radiates from here. That's why there's a different effect.
Okay. The three-dimensional S-curve of a force vector, nature's most fundamental, and this, of course, is a force vector of...
All right, a force vector, something fundamental to nature. Now, nowhere fundamental to nature is any curved line, so there's no evidence that there's any curved line elemental function of the universe. No evidence whatsoever. Not a single experiment verifies or indicates it even. It's just made up by Ken Wheeler because it looks like an infinity symbol. I'm halfway there. I'm yin-yanging. It's religion.
Magnetism. This is, of course, a centrifugal, divergent, extrapolates out the toroidal interior. Whoops. draw a
So here we
toroidal
go. Here we go.
In the case of this bar magnet, actually the toroid would go this way.
Yeah, it's absolutely, that's right. You can't even draw your tornadoes correctly. Tornado out of this end, tornado out of this end, and then hyperboloids going around this way in a donut shape, all the way around. Yeah, some kind of horse shit like that. So there's no poles, but there's toroids and tornadoes, or hyperboloids and tornadoes. But there's no poles.
Actually, like this. There we go. I drew the torus 90 degrees opposite of what it should be because I'm thinking about 10,000 things at once while I'm drawing on this pad.
Yeah, I don't think you're thinking of 10,000 things. Maybe you're thinking about, well, I wonder what the actual mass of my ass is. Maybe you're doing that.
But that's the case. Actually, let me draw that bar magnet vertical.
How big a toroid is my ass creating? So again, he goes back to this crap. And it's just crap. It's just a crappy, stupid, incoherent image of nonsense. Somehow this and this and this and this is somehow making a magnet a magnet. When you put a bunch of little these together, somehow they all add up to one big this and big this and swirly this crap and the swirly this crap, and somehow that crap causes attraction and repulsion in some kind of mechanically understandable way. No, it doesn't do any of that. It's just absolute crap as an explanation. It doesn't explain why there's attraction and why there's repulsion at all. Alright, enough. So depressing. Just, I hate this planet. This planet of the way too fucking stupid.